I think also to add, at the moment, there are only two evidence-based treatment forms, particularly for post-traumatic stress disorder or complex PTSD, which is CBT and EMDR. And I have great respect for both. However, there's lots of other things that work that just don't have sufficient evidence base yet. Um, Hypnotherapy or NLP in terms of parts integration are fantastic tools. Meditation, mindfulness all work towards having a more secure, solid foundation and core identity, core belief. It doesn't really matter which modalities and methodologies are used, as long as we're meeting our client, family, friend, whoever, at the place where they are and with tools that are relevant to them. Um, and if you don't feel equipped, the best thing you can possibly do is just hear. It's just a compassionate, humane act to let that person speak whatever it is that they need to have heard, because
Mm.
that will be so important for them. And we may be the first person that they've spoken to about these things. So if you ever find yourself, dear listener, in a position where someone is opening up to you like this, don't add to it, don't validate it, don't negate it, just simply compassionately listen, and then we can work afterwards on signposting and education and reassurance. And yeah, if your first instinct is I'm not the person to help with this, then that's fantastic, because that in itself is a recognition of something that's very important. um, but allow the speaking of the event and then help the person to find the right kind of help for them. And that doesn't have to be those two prescriptive evidence-based methodologies, because there is so much else out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'd like to just add it. I agree wholeheartedly with that, Alec. That, first of all, first and foremost, it is that being heard. Having somebody that's there just to listen, not to judge, just to listen and let them say what they need to say. And there's so many different modalities out there now, and some are going to work for some people, or some are going to work for other people. And somebody said to me today as well. He's a friend. He's not a client. He's a friend of mine, and he's been through his fair share of traumas in his life. And he said to me something. He said, however many times you fall down, he said, every time you fall differently. He said, one time maybe you break a leg, another time maybe you break an arm. And obviously he's talking metaphorically about trauma. And so one time, one thing might work, one mythology, one might work for a client. They may come back at another point and they need something else. They need a different approach. It's never a one size fits all. It's never even, depending on where they are on the journey. They're going to need different things. But as Alex said, first and foremost is that somebody having that connection with them, having that time, holding space for them. That's really, really important. And then you can work from there.
Yeah, this is really important, because when we said at the start, let's have a look at solution and what to do. For me, that's really important, because we never get taught that anywhere, to hold difficult conversations or be there for people. Uh, you know, I realized when I was diagnosed with cancer at the time, people avoided the real issues. They came up with advice. They said sometimes the silliest things, because we don't know how to hold these conversations. We never taught to do so. So to the listeners out there, because if somebody has trauma in our family or there's something underlying, how do we deal with it? What would be your, not advice, but what would you say out of your own practice, what you have learned? Simple techniques somebody can use to help their loved ones, because as you said, they probably have to go and see maybe a professional, but it's a question of finding out which part, what type of professional will help you. So your family, your friends, your loved ones are the first port of call always, and we live with the other person often. So what would you say to people to do in really practical terms to help that person?
I think first and foremost for me is to not be afraid, to ask them, to not be afraid to talk to them, to ask them the difficult questions. I think we're so afraid of kind of triggering trauma survivors, but they're used to living with the trauma. A lot of the time they may have been, they may have been living with it for days or weeks or months or even years. That they're used to the trauma. The things they're not used to is feeling joy and feeling calm and feeling peace and being able to relax. These are the things they're struggling with. So I think it's first of all is not being afraid to broach those difficult subjects and be direct and be honest. And I think initially is just trying to get people to be able to relax. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the somatic work is really, really important. I think trauma, we need to deal with it both on a cognitive level and on a somatic level. And I think if they're still very traumatized and they're kind of in these kind of fight, flight, defense modes or anything, they're not able to cognitively process very much. So I think I would always start with the body and start with trying to, even if it's just taking deep breaths, just doing it, some kind of muscle relaxing. I think one I like to use is like our body is supported by two systems. It's supported by our skeletal system and our muscular system. Okay, so while we're here just sitting chatting to each other, we're sitting in our chairs, we're supported. Yeah, there is no reason for us to be using any muscle in our body. We should not need to tense any muscle. If we have a reasonably supportive chair and we're just sitting, yeah, we shouldn't need to use a single muscle in our body. So I often use this with clients, is to just to put faith in your skeletal system, even if it's just for a few seconds. Just for a few seconds, just to relax into the chair. Let the chair take all that weight. Just kind of sink into the chair. Let the chair take the weight, and let every single muscle relax. You can do like a body scan. So you start from the head, working down to the feet. And even if somebody can manage that for a couple of seconds initially, yeah, that's actually slowly going to start resetting their autonomic nervous system, so that they can then start to get the cognitive bit back online and start to be able to comprehend things a little bit better. So I think that's probably where I would start, just with very simple things, mindfulness exercises. There's a very simple one: 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear. I'm sure most of you have heard of that one. These kind of things, and also that takes away the attention for a moment from the trauma. Okay, it's bringing them back into the present. It's connecting them with now, rather than being back there in the trauma. So I think these are very tiny things, very easy things that people can do, just to try and start to bring the system down into a more calm state. So I think that's where I would start anyway.
I think Melanie's encapsulated it all. A person needs to feel safe in order for the threat system to slow down, and we can think of it like a parachute. The parasympathetic nervous system needs to be in the ascendant if we're going to feel that we're in a safe situation. I would say, don't be afraid to have a conversation with someone that is telling you about trauma, but you don't need to probe in depth. You know, it's enough to know some of the big factors. For instance, you know, did you feel that you were out of control? Did you fear for your life? Is there a sense of blame or shame? They're the immediate things that people might have. And then later on, there's, you know, the stuff of how you're going about your daily life. You know, have you got a support system? Are you able to go back to work? You know, are you having flashbacks? Is there a acute stuff going on around the long-term elements of your life? And if someone is able to speak about a trauma, something that's bothering them, then you have the opportunity to do the reassurance to help, if you have the knowledge to educate them, or if not, to do the signposting. So I think there's probably two elements. One is the person just out of the trauma, in which case safety, you know, the bottom part of the hierarchy of needs, safety, security, comfort, you know, physical needs. And then there's the, okay, this has happened, and now we need to help you to process it. So probably different approaches, but I think it would be really self-evident which part you're in. You know, because you're either there as a responder and helping, and I don't mean that in the emergency services sense. I mean, like Melanie's bystander, the lady that came and sat in the car with her, and those sorts of things. And we've seen how important that is. So you've got the immediate safety element, and then you've got the later unraveling of the issues.
Can I just add to that one? Something else that this just come to mind is also giving back control. I think is very important, because I think a lot of people that have been through a traumatic event, sometimes a lot of that trauma is caused by feeling that they didn't have control. So I think it's very important to give the person choices, so that they can start to feel that that they've got some control back in their life. I mean, that can be a really simple thing. Do you want tea or coffee? Do you want to sit here or do you want to sit here? It can be very, very subtle, tiny things, but just giving them the opportunity to make a choice, I think can also be very, very helpful, especially early on, in these circumstances.
Exactly. And that plays right into the people who have the most positive outcomes feel that they did something to help themselves survive. So 100% agreement. Yeah.
So what I hear, it's very important to just be there, not to be afraid of actually being there for the person, to make sure they feel safe, to give them choices, and to just listen without judgment and without asking kind of probing questions, giving the person the space to talk and share what they would like to share, and also give them the understanding that they know they're not alone, and asking them, do you need help? What can I do? Is there something I can do for you? So they feel they have the support, they're not alone, and taking back control. Is that a good summary?
Very much so. It's the common response to an uncommon situation. What you're thinking, feeling, the way your body is reacting is all, I don't like to use the word normal, it's a common reaction. And the situation that you have just experienced is uncommon. By definition, it has to be outside of your normal area of control, your sphere of influence. And I suppose really what we're talking about is helping somebody regain the internal locus of control. Something has come down and snatched it out of their grasp completely unexpectedly, and that requires something of a paradigm shift to feel that you are back in control of your life, that you do have a sphere of influence, and that regardless of what just happened, there will be choices, and you will continue to be the architect of your life as you want it to be, unless you throw down the trowel and the bricks and just give up on it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. This has been absolutely wonderful. I learned a lot, and I hope our listeners had a lot of value. I am sure they did. Do you have any final thoughts or comments you would like to share with the listeners?
I'd like to just mention one thing. Again, it's from a book. It's from one of Gabor Mate's book, who's another, kind of leader in the trauma world at the moment. And that was about World War II. And this is just to kind of highlight how important that support is. And they did some research after World War II from children from London. And they found some of the children, they stayed in London, so they were there and they were witness to the bombings, and they had to go to the underground shelters and all this kind of thing. And then they had another group of children that were evacuated to the countryside, went to live relatives and this kind of thing. And they did some studies with these two groups of children after the war. And what was surprising is they found that the ones that were evacuated to get them away from the war, they had more trauma symptoms than the children that were left in London, and which was obviously very surprising for them. But they kind of found that because the children in London, they were still with their family, they were still with their friends, they had people around them that were supporting them, that they felt loved, they felt safe within the family unit. Whereas the other children, they were kind of farmed out to distant relatives that they maybe only seen once or twice. They're going to new schools, they've got they've lost all their friends, they've got nobody they feel they can confide in. And so this meant that they actually were more traumatized than the children that were there in the Blitz, in the midst of the bombing. So I find that very interesting and a very clear message as to showing how important support is to people that are going through anything traumatic.
I think my final thought would be that vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. If you are open about what's happening for you and the impact it's having on you, then you have an opportunity to set yourself a new baseline of resilience. And resilience itself isn't a fixed trait. It has to be fluid, it has to be flexible, and it is something that can be developed with the right help. And I would not be sitting here having this conversation with you if I hadn't put that out there, opened myself up, allowed myself to recognize that I wanted to take responsibility. I wanted to be different to the way I was, but I needed some help. And I think if you're open to that and you're processing it and you have the ability to reach into that social support, self-awareness, do some learning and some reflection, they will serve you well as a foundation for personal responsibility. And as Melanie said, having a life that's worth living, because we're not defined by what happened, we're defined by the way we move forward from it.
Yeah, that's wonderful last words. And for anybody out listening who would like to contact you, maybe get, have a personal conversation with you, how can they find you?
I'm Alec at desiredstate.uk, and my website is just desiredstate.uk.
Mm-hmm. And Melanie?
Okay, you can. I think the easiest for me is to reach through Instagram, Melanie Holmes Coaching, or you can reach out through LinkedIn. My website's under construction, so you can email me at Melanie at regulatecoaching.com.
regulatecoaching.com. Super. Thank you very much for coming today. And thank you very much for all your really valuable insights and knowledge.
It's been wonderful talking. Thank you, Gaby, for hosting.
Thanks, Gaby, and thanks, Melanie. It's great to have the conversation with you.
And see you soon in the next episode. Bye.